In season 1, I recorded the episode, Are Riches Deceiving You? In it, we explored the deceitfulness of riches, a thorn of the heart that causes us to try to reward ourselves, only to arrive at the reward of being crushed by the weight of our own self-disappointment. Today, we sit down with Arshel Bowen, who co-pastors Engaged Church in Waldorf, Maryland. This is where she lives with her husband, Pastor Nelson Bowen, and their beautiful 7-month-old Ace. Arshel is also a social worker you can find through Psychology Today, and she's been working with children and families for over 7 years. In this interview, Arshel very relatably walks us through her ups and downs with disappointment, waiting, and reward. Stay tuned. Dr. Shauna Knox, and this is Further, where we explore the real Christ and the real you. The way to life is extremely narrow, and very few of us ever even find it. But let's keep looking. We'll do it together. The heart of thorny soil receives the seed of revelation only to have the seed choked away by the cares of the world. And today we're talking about the deceitfulness of riches. Have you ever had that experience of receiving a revelation from God and then having that revelation disappear because it's choked out by the deceitfulness of riches?
A few things actually come to mind when you ask that question.
Mm-hmm.
I'll actually go back to when I was in college,
Mm-hmm.
and I was dating a guy,
Okay.
and I was dating him for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that he was going to be my husband.
Mm-hmm.
You could not tell me anything differently.
Mm-mm.
You couldn't show me anything different. I felt like the Lord said it, and it is so.
Mm-hmm.
And when I graduated from grad school, I was in my devotion during the week. I remember it like it was yesterday. And God asked me some very specific questions. And the questions that he asked me, my response to those questions were contrary to what was happening in my relationship. And it was gut-wrenching. It was one of those things where, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, where God will ask you a question and you know the answer to the question,
Yeah.
but you try to avoid it. Or
Yeah.
you some way, somehow try to like wiggle your way
Yeah.
out of this. Like, no, I know I didn't hear
Oh, no,
that.
absolutely. Yes. I know exactly what you're talking about.
It was, I mean, I tried to avoid it for a few days. And
Yeah.
finally, I sat with it and I had to make a very difficult decision. Well, you know, I didn't have to make it. I chose to make that decision.
Yeah.
And I remember breaking it off with my then boyfriend. And I drove to work every single day crying. Like, what did I just do? This was the question I was asking myself. So on one hand, I was like, I feel like I'm making the right decision. But on the other hand, it was so against what I really, really wanted to do. And it was, and then the thought was, what are other people going to think?
Yeah.
What is my mom going to say? What is his family going to think? And for whatever reason, I'm going to be the villain in the situation.
Yeah.
And it was gut-wrenching.
Yeah.
And that was probably one of the hardest decisions that I ever had to make. But also one of the best decisions that I ever made. So to answer your question, yeah, that season of my life was extremely difficult. It was painful. It was gut-wrenching. But I believe it was necessary. And it allowed me to go further with my relationship with Christ. And it allowed me to experience things a lot differently than I had prior to that.
I'm glad you use this example, because when you talk about riches, people typically go to one place. They go to money, you know, and it's really not just money. You know, it's something that you think will just add to your life in this way
So
that
good.
like you need it to be enriched. And so what I'm hearing you say is you had this moment with the Lord where he asked you these questions and you knew you needed to leave this relationship. And it was just so hard to be able to like tear yourself away from it, because there was this deceit that was like really convincing you that the way this relationship enriched you, you couldn't afford to lose it. So you just like were thinking through how other people would perceive it, how you would feel, and then you were actually feeling the feeling that goes with the deceit. Like you were driving to work and you were crying because the feeling was this is an indelible loss. This is a loss that I won't be able to like recoup, because I needed to be enriched in this way, and I'm losing it, and I'm letting myself lose it, but I'm still convinced that I like need it.
Yeah, that's literally exactly. And I think also, you know, at that age, I wasn't dating around. I wasn't at a season of my life where I was just dating this
You were
guy.
zipping up.
It was like, listen, this is the time
This is the
where
guy.
you start transitioning,
Yes.
and these are the things that just
My ducks
naturally
are in a row.
Let's go.
Yeah.
And I think even you know, when you get into a relationship and you're thinking long term, in your mind you start planning for long term.
Of course.
What does long term look like? Okay, long term looks like, you know, maybe we're gonna get married, we're gonna have a kid, we're gonna live here, and so when all of that is disrupted and uprooted, it just does something to you that's like, it's like pulling the rug right from under you. Well, that's how it was for me in my, you know, particular, and it wasn't expected, you know, and that was, it was a lot. It was a lot in that season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from what you're saying, I could guess the lie that the riches were telling you. But I prefer to actually ask you, like, what is the lie that riches were telling you, either in this instance or in some other instance? How have they lied to you in the past?
I would probably say the first thing that comes to my mind is telling you, or telling me specifically, that if this does not happen, then you're doomed.
Yeah.
If this does not happen, you are not as loyal as you think you are. If this does not happen, you are not fill in the blank as you think. And I think that is the part that kind of gets us off, because for me, when I think about who I am as a person, I know that I'm a very loyal person. But when you leave someone that you've been with for 4 years, and at that time that felt like forever, that says that you're not loyal. And so I think internally you're fighting that battle between like the flesh, what I want, what I feel like I deserve, what I worked hard for. I prayed for this thing. I interceded for this thing. I've been, you know, doing all the things that I know to do. And then the spiritual component, which is like, but what am I telling you? What did I share with you in that alone time?
Yeah.
What about me? And so a lot of times I think we pick what feels most comfortable in that moment or in that season, and not what God would have us to do, which is sometimes the hard thing. Let's be very clear. The things that we're asked to do sometimes are very difficult.
Yeah.
But it's worth it. it's so worth it. And I think sometimes in those moments we decide to do something else because we don't understand how worth it really is.
No, absolutely. You know, just seeing that lie, it's not just the lie that this is going to hurt so much, because that's really not a lie. It did hurt, but the feeling of doom, you were like, I'm going to be doomed, and then you felt the loss. But the lie is what this means about you. If you leave this person you've been with for this many years, who you had the plan with, something of your identity that's precious to you will be lost because you're making that decision.
Absolutely.
So this type of riches adds something to you that you can't afford to lose, or you won't be you anymore.
Right.
And I think that's an important nuance, is that the loss of the riches, that deceit, it's not just about the fact that, you know, the riches convincing you that you need it and you're realizing you don't. It's also like how it's making you to feel like you rely on that thing to be who you are. And if you don't have that, then you aren't who you are anymore.
Yeah.
And that's a lie. That's the lie of the riches. Can you remember a time where that voice was there lying to you about something else, and you weren't able to make the decision that you made in this scenario, where you responded to the voice of the Lord even though that lie was coming in your direction? Can you tell us about a time when you really allowed the riches to deceive you?
It's a really good question. I would probably say when I was going into my first job after grad school, it's funny how a lot of stuff happened right after grad school. But I was working, and I was working hard. I was actually working at Department of Social Services, and I was working with foster care youth. And it's a very difficult job. It's very rewarding, but it's just difficult because it's really tough. Mentally, emotionally, you know, it was just a lot. And I was doing a few other things, and I remember having this feeling of losing my mojo. And I'll explain a little what I mean by that. But all throughout undergrad and even in grad school, I felt like I was always able to will myself to getting things done. I might not be the smartest, I might not be the fastest, but you cannot outwork me. That's like my mojo, right? And I'm using mojo loosely.
Get it done.
I can get it done. You will not outwork me. I can promise you that, right? And so I got into this season where I felt like, where's my mojo? Where is it? I can't find it. I don't have the motivation. I don't have the discipline. I don't have the dedication. I don't have the passion. And it became scary. And what I realized after months and months, and I would probably even say years maybe, or a year.